There's another phrase that I think is getting some attention right now in that OSM is, more than just an online community, but really it's a community of communities.
Welcome to another episode of the Mapscaping podcast. My name is Daniel and this is a podcast for the geospatial community. My guest on the show today is Jennings Anderson. He is a geoinformation research scientist who has spent a lot of time looking at the evolution of OpenStreetMap. So a wee while ago, a significant milestone was passed in terms of the evolution of OpenStreetMap, and that milestone was the 100th millionth change set was uploaded to OpenStreetMap. So I'm reading directly from the blog post now, and it says, this milestone represents a collective contribution of nearly 1 billion features globally in the past 16 plus years, by a diverse community of over 1.5 million mappers. So this is huge. So by now you've probably guessed that today on the podcast we're going to be talking about the evolution of OpenStreetMap. We're going to be talking about the community. Who are these people that are creating all these edits, that are uploading these change sets, and what OpenStreetMap as a project might look like in the future. Hey Jennings, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for doing this with me. Really appreciate your time. Today, we're going to be talking about OpenStreetMap. Perhaps we could start with just a brief introduction. Who are you and how did you get involved with OpenStreetMap?
Yeah, my name is Jennings Anderson, and I'm a geoinformation scientist, and I've been researching the evolution of OpenStreetMap for the past 7 years or so. I was first introduced to OSM at the beginning of graduate school at the University of Colorado Boulder. This was back in 2014, and I was looking specifically at humanitarian mapping in OSM. This was around the time that HOT, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, was introducing the version 2 of their tasking manager, which helps people better coordinate humanitarian mapping in OSM. Humanitarian mapping is when hundreds or now thousands of mappers converge on the map and create data in response to humanitarian relief. I really dove headfirst into the analysis at the time, looking at the response to the 2010 Haiti earthquake and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines in 2013. In doing so, I learned that there were a number of tools available for working with OSM data to make a map. But when it came to data analysis, specifically looking at the full historical data set of OSM, there were far fewer tools available. And it was really then that I discovered that OSM is so much more than a map and a database. It's really a global community of mappers. Questions about OSM, how it's evolved, go so much deeper than just looking at the features on the map, such as the roads or the buildings. It's really about the community. And so I take what I came to call a contributor-centric approach to OSM analysis, as opposed to a data-centric approach. And this includes questions that stem from how many mappers are working on the map, when, who they are, and what types of changes they're making, as opposed to just questions about how much data exists or does not exist in that region. I've kind of said before, when it comes to OSM data quality, it's not necessarily a question of, is the map of an area good enough? It's when will the map of an area become good enough for whatever use case one may have. With thousands of mappers making millions of edits every day, the map is really only moving in one direction over time, and that's improving. I think I've also had some really good timing. Many great folks all around the world had similar questions with regards to OSM data quality. We were all developing approaches to some of the same questions in parallel, and then meeting up at conferences to discuss the challenges and the successes that we were having. So fast forward about 6 years, the title of my PhD dissertation was Contributor-Centric Analytics for OpenStreetMap, Approaches to Full-Stack Metadata-Driven Analysis Infrastructure for an Open Geospatial Data Platform. I know that's quite a mouthful, but all that is to say that I've been studying OSM for a number of years now and have been very fortunate to have collaborated and continue to collaborate with companies like Mapbox, Development Seed, Facebook, the Youth Mappers organization that supports thousands of student mappers all around the globe, and researchers at the Heidelberg Institute for Geoinformation Technology, as well as many other academic researchers in this growing domain of OpenStreetMap data analysis. So that's what brings us to today. And thank you very much for having me on.
That was the most amazing in-depth introduction that anyone has ever given on the podcast. Congratulations. And thank you very much. I think I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again just to make sure that I got it all. A couple of things that really, really stood out for me there. My next question was actually going to be like, what is OSM? But I think you answered it. You said it's more than a database. It's more than a map, it's a community. And then you talked about this need to understand what was driving the community, who is the community, why are they doing what they're doing. Maybe we could start off there. Why are they doing what they're doing? Who is the community, and how do you know?
Yeah. So OSM's been around since 2004, and it was initially started as a substitute for official, hard to obtain spatial data. And so Steve Coe started it as a student at University College London, and then the project really just kind of took off. People come online and contribute local knowledge, or any other spatial data that they may have and know about, and it's grown now to over 1.6 million contributors have ever actually edited the map, which I think is just an incredibly impressive number. There's another phrase that I think is getting some attention right now, in that OSM is, more than just an online community, but really it's a community of communities. Patricia Solis has been talking about this term in some of her work. And what I mean by that is we have the humanitarian mappers in OSM, people who are focused on contributing data from a humanitarian perspective. We have the hobbyists that have been around for years, contributing very specific, niche knowledge here and there. We now have a large community of corporate actors who are contributing data, presumably in relation to kind of their corporate interest and their data use case. Local communities all around the world, local chapters. It's impressive how OSM really is a little bit of everyone in the map.
I just want to make sure I've understood this. Earlier in the conversation, we talked about a change set, and we've also used the words editing quite a bit. Are they the same things? Is a change set a single edit? Is it a group of edits? Well, could you just define that for us?
Certainly, certainly. In OSM, there are three types of what they call OSM elements. You have nodes, which are just your points; ways, which is basically a line, right, a collection of points; and then relations, which kind of are a collection of nodes, ways, and more relations. And so a node might just be like a drinking fountain or a statue. A way would be, say, a road or a building. And then a relation could be, the collection of all the ways that make up a country outline. And so each of those elements, an edit to any one of those single pieces, would be considered a change to the database. That would be an edit. And a change set is kind of the logical grouping of all the edits. When someone's performing edits in OSM using whichever tool they might be using to do these edits, the most popular, especially among newcomers, would be the ID editor, which is just built right into the main website. And you can go in there and you can make a whole bunch of changes to these OSM elements. And then when you press save, that will submit what we call a change set. And the change set can have some metadata with it: the time it was created, who the user was who made these changes, as well as, you can put hashtags and comments to let other users know, other mappers know why you made that edit or what imagery you used to make that edit, et cetera. And so that then helps, analysts further down the road know what was happening there in the map when that edit occurred.
So in other online communities, if we think of Wikipedia, for example, the Wikipedians need to come to a consensus and agree on something before it gets published to Wikipedia. Is this the same thing that's happening in OSM? If I create a point of interest, for example, does everybody need to agree that that actually exists, or that that is called what it's actually called? How does that work?
Certainly. So best practices say that, you should map what the physical world represents. And so best case, if you do map something and name it, I should be able to go to that place in the real world and see that is mapped in the right place, and that the name and the information is accurate. And I don't think that anyone would take a problem with me updating that piece of information that you added to the map to reflect reality as it was there, if there was something different. In terms of reaching a consensus, it's possible you could get back and forth into these kind of like edit wars on if someone disagreed on how something should be mapped, but then that typically gets elevated to the data working group to oversee those types of conflicts and find a resolution. But overall, I think it's pretty amazing that, there are millions of edits happening every day, and not that much conflict truly around what is truth. It's just thousands of mappers trying to map the world around them.
I think it's absolutely amazing what's happening. I mean, it's an incredibly diverse community with a diverse set of interests, but they're, as you said earlier, converging on the map and improving it, adding to it. making it better for everyone. It is truly amazing. I just want to stay with this idea of updating features and coming to a consensus just for a second. I'm curious about a situation perhaps where we have a politically disputed geographical border. How would OSM deal with that? If I go to Google, for example, that shows me what I want to see, depending what land I'm in. Let's say I'm in India, for example, I'll see the border the way I understand it in India. If I go to China, I'll see the border the way the Chinese understand the border. How does OSM deal with those kinds of issues?
That's a really great question. There is a very active mailing list and a wiki where a lot of these discussions kind of get hashed out. One of the more recent examples would probably be the borders in Ukraine and Crimea around some of this work. And it definitely does kind of come to community consensus based on the discussions on the mailing lists, as well as, when things get really problematic, they do get escalated up to the data working group to kind of make the final call. But these are people that are kind of chosen by the community, and that's not necessarily a single person's decision, and those decisions get made with some level of community agreement and definitely just get hashed out across the mailing list and wikis.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the community. We've talked about the diverse set of people coming together to make the map better. We've talked about how we might resolve conflicts in terms of mapping. But I can see another really interesting thing here. Earlier, when we talked about the community, you mentioned that there was private people doing this, but there was also corporations interested in editing the map. I could perhaps understand why a private person might want to update the map. They might have hiking outdoor interests, that they might just want to use the data themselves. But could you talk to us what a company is getting out of this? What corporations, what value they see in OpenStreetMap?
Certainly. So when it comes to mapping the world, OpenStreetMap, the greatest thing about the data is that it's free, openly editable, will always be free, and can be used really for any purpose. The data is released under the ODBL, the Open Database License, which says that anyone can take this data and really do whatever they want with it as long as they provide proper attribution to the contributors. So when it comes to businesses looking for and corporations looking for spatial data of the world to put into their products and into their maps, OpenStreetMap becomes really a fantastic data set to use, as opposed to, say, paying another commercial provider. And more than that, in many parts of the world, OpenStreetMap is really the highest quality data, sometimes because it's the only source of digital spatial information. So to that end, a number of companies have begun consuming OSM data and putting it into their products. And they're also employing teams of editors to ensure quality. And as they're coming across errors in the map, they're not just making those changes in their own map, but they're actually making those changes upstream in the main database. So everyone's kind of able to benefit from that. So yeah, as I've said before, like companies like, say, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, who are using some of this data, they each have teams, and say that each one of them edits a road and or adds a building. Each one of those teams now gets 3 buildings on their map, right? As opposed to just doing this work individually. So it's this incredible site of collaboration among people trying to map the world, corporations alike.
Do you think some of these really big players, do you think they are looking at this as almost like a battleground, like a chance to rival Google? So with the thinking that the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
I think that's maybe one, yeah, maybe one way to look at it. That's maybe not too far from reality. I mean, Facebook is now consuming OSM data to power the maps in their products, and their goal with OSM is to make sure that OSM is the highest quality, most complete map data source that they can pull in to give their users the most complete experience. Microsoft, Uber, Lyft, Apple, all the same things. So in that regard, they're choosing to use OSM as opposed to paying a company like Google for that data. To that end, maybe that is, you have this arena where you have all these companies collaborating, and together, they can create something and use something that rivals their biggest competitor.
I can definitely see the network effect taking over here. And I can completely understand why corporations and private people are interested in updating the map. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons for that. Is there any conflict between these two groups? Do you see anything in the community that suggests that, oh, hey, we're not really interested in corporations coming here? This is built by the community for the community. We're not interested in you participating?
Yeah, so this was research that I did in 2019 when we kind of identified that there was so much corporate editing, as we were calling it, really picking up in the basically between 2015 and 2018 is really when we saw this big increase. And there's certainly concerns, right? You could imagine that if this is a map made by locals about their local community, that if a corporation came in and started making a lot of edits, that some people might feel that there's potential that they might get, pushed out. I don't know that we have the data to show that really happens. Certainly we could find, such a big database, you can find little anecdotes here and there, but ultimately these teams are creating, they're working all over the globe. Facebook, through the introduction of their product, Rapid Editor, incorporates machine learning to kind of help turbocharge mapping efforts. And that was heavily used to map most of the road network of Thailand and Indonesia. And ultimately, they were able to collaborate, I think, with a lot of local mappers there and fix some of these kind of conflicts that arose about their presence there. And so, and there is a lot of discussion happening out there. Is this a corporate takeover? The OSM survey that just went out, asked people if they're concerned about these types of issues. And I think that people are certainly skeptical. And I think there's good reason to be skeptical and be aware. But I don't know that the evidence necessarily supports that narrative yet. And so I think it's important to be aware and to really study what's happening to understand what the impact looks like. And that's what we're trying to do.
So I understand that each different corporation probably has different interests, but when a corporation in general, when they start editing an area, do you see them going through and digitizing everything, buildings, houses, roads, parks, points of interest, or do they focus on very specific topics?
It really does depend on what the purpose is. So, for example, Amazon logistics team, they edit primarily in North America and the UK, and they're editing driveways, right? And then they're turning around and using that data, I believe, in their delivery network so that they can be more efficient and know where certain driveways are and certain homes and buildings. And so when it comes to companies like that, they're really focused on a specific type of data. There's another company in Egypt called Digital Egypt, and they're focused on creating an incredible amount of data in OSM for Egypt. And so they're mapping specifically building addresses in like Cairo. And last I looked, Cairo might be one of the most completely mapped cities in terms of the building addresses and making that data, really valuable and really usable there. So yeah, certainly different companies kind of have different pieces that they focus on, which I think also enables kind of goes back to that question of, okay, if they're how does that change interaction with the local community? We can find examples in the map where, say, Facebook's work that laid the road infrastructure in Thailand, that really started where there wasn't anything on the map in some of these more rural areas. And now once the road network is in, now other people show up, other community members show up and start mapping, filling in the buildings. So I think there's kind of there's definitely a lot of nuances into how the map fills in with regard to this kind of corporate influence.
So editing the map, that's one way of contributing to it. I think you mentioned before a tool called the Facebook Rapid Editor. So that's another way of contributing to the community, to the effort by creating these tools. A wee while ago, Microsoft used some incredible machine learning algorithm and some computer vision, possibly a little bit of AI, and produced these amazing building footprint data sets for Canada, for the US, and for Tanzania as well. Can they contribute that to the map as well? Could they just go in and dump this into the map and say, here, we've done the work? Personally, I could see that this would be a huge benefit to the community if all of a sudden they had all this extra data. Are contributions like that welcomed?
That's a really good question, and that was another big point on the survey that people kind of raised concerns about as we know we're going into more of an AI driven future. And those two projects you bring up specifically go really well hand in hand. So the rapid editor that Facebook created was a fork of the popular ID editor that allows a user to, as they're looking at aerial imagery, to see a road that has been determined through AI and machine vision to see the potential for a road. And instead of drawing that road, the computer's already kind of drawn it in there for them. And they then can click that and say, yes, this road is here, or oh no, that's not proper. So in terms of an actual import into the map or that data just automatically going in, that's not happening. There's still a human definitely in charge and being the one to finally click submit. And so the rapid editor actually, now includes that full layer of all those Microsoft buildings. So when you're looking at it at an area, you can choose, okay, show me the Microsoft buildings. And now when I'm going to map a town, I can have the choice to see all the buildings that this AI thought were there, and I can then go click on the ones that, yes, that is a real building. Click, 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 and then click accept and submit and create that change set, and that is going to just speed up the mapping process by not having to trace out those buildings individually. But it's still not necessarily an automatic ingestion of that data. That would be called an import, and those kind of have their own different regulations and best practices around them. So that's what like a tool like that does. Speaking of tools, though, also Mapbox has been building tools for years around OSM. Really popular one now would be OSM CHA, which is the OSM Change Set Analyzer, which allows users to go in and see what edits have been happening and tag things as incorrect or potential vandalism, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly these corporations and organizations have been contributing tools to the map for a long time, as well as data and imagery, right? I don't know that we would even have OSM in its current form if we didn't have companies like Yahoo and Bing making openly available aerial imagery as early as like 2007, so that people had something to digitize to really grow that map. So again, just these nuances of long time corporate involvement in this project to really make it such a success.
You talked about vandalism before. So, we see attacks on the internet all the time where people, for whatever reason, decide they want to attack a website, a server, something like that. Have we ever seen anything like that with OSM, where people have purposely sought to vandalize it, to disrupt the service?
Unfortunately, yes. There has been some, high profile cases that did make the news, and those have been very unfortunate. Overall, though, the vandalism, explicit vandalism, I think is far less common than kind of accidental vandalism or poor quality. One example would be Pokemon Go. It was found that Niantic was using OpenStreetMap data in terms of how they were producing some of the Pokemon that people were going out and collecting. And so people were then going in, and I believe they were drawing like ponds in OpenStreetMap in their backyard so that more of these like waterborne Pokemon would spawn in their backyard so that they could go catch them. And obviously that was incorrect. There wasn't a water feature in their backyard. And that became this kind of vandalism of the map of making this incorrect map, but it was being, so in that sense of vandalism, I think that's, much more wholesome. It's like people figured that out and said, okay, don't do this. That's not what this project is for. And that was less of a problem. Egregious cases, yeah, have happened. Someone did change the name of New York to an ethnic slur, and that was picked up by some major media companies. And I don't think that did any favors for the project. But the most important thing is that edit was, reverted back and changed and fixed by someone in the community within hours of it happening. And so maybe that speaks to the quality of the community and the response and kind of, guaranteed of quality over time.
This seems like the perfect project, right? The poster child for community, the poster child for public and private communities working together to create this common good. Is it like that? Like, is it this sort of perfect symbiosis where everybody gets what they need?
Certainly not. I think that there are a lot of really feel good aspects to the project, and the success is amazing to witness, but there are a lot of definitely challenges. Diversity and representation in the map is a huge problem, and this has been acknowledged as a major problem that the board needs to be addressing, and they're trying to take the first steps in addressing some of these issues and representation. The mailing list, if you follow that a lot of these issues get brought up there, and there's a lot of disagreements around that. So yeah, word of the hour is probably, the nuances of OSM. But overall, I think it is a fantastic example of it is still very successful and it's growing every day. It's continuing to improve. New users are joining every day, and the world is getting mapped. To that end, absolutely, but there's certainly a long ways to go.
I just want to be clear here. I am a super fan of this project, and I'm definitely not looking for conflict where no conflict exists. I'm just curious, that's all. You mentioned before diversity and representation. What do you mean by that? Are we talking about different cultures being involved in creating the map? Are we talking about different understandings? Are we talking about different cultural physical objects, geographic places being mapped and named in an appropriate way? What are we talking about when we talk about diversity in the map?
Sure. I'm speaking specifically about diversity in the community. And so, gender diversity, racial diversity, it's definitely a Eurocentric project in that that's where it started and where it really took root. The largest community is the German community, and then I believe the kind of the United States community, because it's such a large area, just by number of mappers. And that becomes the question of, okay, is this just if you have this Eurocentric domination in the makeup of the community, is that going to be reflected in what gets mapped? I don't think that's necessarily true, that will necessarily create that, but I think that obviously creating a more diverse mapping community around the world is going to create better opportunities for local data, et cetera. And so that's certainly happening. And it's been amazing to see, like, the State of the Map Africa, for example, has been an annual conference now that's been running and focused on the mapping that's happening in Africa, many local communities, local chapters. So this is great to see that this is definitely improving, but to say that that there's equal representation within the community isn't accurate. But I think that we can, always be striving to get closer to equality there.
What would be a showstopper for OpenStreetMap? Because back in the day, Yahoo was the internet for a while there, and then Google took over as being the gatekeeper. Is there anything out there that sort of rivals OpenStreetMap at the moment?
Hmm. The biggest rival in terms of data source would be, Google Maps, and they're going to continue to grow. But I think the rate at which OSM is growing and its price point of, free is always going to be able to rival that. I see that as maybe the largest, data wise competitor, but I don't know that there's, another open geographic data project that would threaten it. If we change the way that we, use and consume spatial data, that could kind of change, but I don't see anything on the horizon around that. We still just need spatial data for the whole world.
When I think about free, like free can be a lot of different things. It can be, here today, gone tomorrow. It can be unreliable. It can be not necessarily not a standard product, for example. That's one thing that free could be. Do you think OSM suffers from that? Does it have a branding problem sometimes when, it's from OSM? I remember back in the day when I was at university, for example, if I referenced Wikipedia, it is an amazing source of information, right? But if I referenced it, I remember my professor saying, "Oh, I don't know if that really counts to reference Wikipedia."
Yeah. Well, so in terms of the longevity of the project, that was just voted, I think, the most important role of the board moving forward is security of the infrastructure and forward thinking in terms of, yeah, what the next steps are to keep the project alive. And so there's definitely a big focus on that. So in terms of here today, gone tomorrow, I'm not worried about it in that regard. I think that there's a lot of great people working to make sure that OSM stays alive. In terms of, yeah, comparison to Wikipedia, I think is so great. And yes, Wikipedia has been, that's been a problem among university students forever, of professors saying, it's a great place to start for your research, but it's not actually, it's not peer reviewed, but in a different way of, the quality of the data there and the trustworthiness. Whereas, yeah, OpenStreetMap is this open data set that's openly editable. And so that's why there are many projects out there to really work at validating this data. And like OSM Cha would be kind of one of the big tools to confirm that. But yeah, at the end of the day, the map's going to represent, what people have put into it. And so there is kind of this worry that it could be vulnerable to some of these larger quality issues. But overall, in a case where you have no data or OpenStreetMap data, having the OSM data is always going to win.
So now the big question, what does the future of OpenStreetMap look like? And I realize it's a difficult one to answer. Maybe I should rephrase that. Maybe I say, what are you most excited about when you think about the future of OSM?
OSM is not a product. That's kind of the design, is that it's really just the collection of data and trying to be the most truthful, complete, accurate collection of open geospatial data out there that then anyone can consume and build their own products on top of it. But I think that there's something amazing about OSM being this, map of the world made, hopefully eventually by the world. I think that's what I see as the exciting future, is that OSM remains this amazing high quality source of geographic information that's open and free. And that's currently the direction that board is definitely, trying to protect, and that's what's in the database license. And I don't see that that's necessarily under threat or anything right now. So I think that that's really what the future looks like, is the success of this project is in the numbers of contributors, and it's continuing to grow every day. So that's what I see. Eventually, hopefully, a more complete and accurate representation of the world, and this data is being consumed by anyone who can and wants to consume it, and do something hopefully neat and revolutionary and exciting.
Jennings, I really want to thank you for your time. Thank you very much for coming along today and shedding a little bit of light on the OpenStreetMap project for us. I really appreciate it. Is there anywhere the listeners can go if they want to reach out to you, if they want to learn more about the research that you're doing?
Yeah, my website's probably the best place. That's just jenningsanderson.com.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Jennings Anderson. As I mentioned just before we said goodbye to Jennings, I'll put a link to his website in the show notes to make it easier for you to track him down if you're interested. And that's it for another episode of the Mapscaping Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in again this week. It's much appreciated. As always, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm most active there. Or go to our website, mapscaping.com. And you can find me those places. Feel free to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. Okay, we'll talk again next week. Bye.